那点一点这里继续你们继续的送去你们送不下的要的。
Today
那
is
课
the
上
third day of
拉美
teachings in the
西尼
spring
我当然会
teachings.
去不的。
And yesterday, the other few
里面
days, we've
当
spoken a lot about the
中国是
characteristics of the
拉美
guru.
西尼的说，常常样忙查的，
Sometimes there are
都
like
有
too
少的
many
这个多要
characteristics
的，
of a guru taught in the
这个
treatises. And if we
对
can't
意
really
思
kind of
的
like
特
get our
征
head
是
around them, get the
多
main points, it becomes a
的。
cause of confusion. And
因为
it
啥
doesn't,
呢？
in actual fact,
拉美
really
西尼
help
的
us all
这
that
个
much.
多少地呢？马就写都代表呢。
So if you're able to like kind of summarize the characteristics, so in terms of this, if we think about like with Gampopa, Gampopa was someone who practiced the teachings on the Kadampa path of the instructions and the instructions of practice lineage of Marpa in union. And Gampopa himself primarily spent his entire life practicing in retreat. And he inspired his practices to practice at one point a day. So he became like the great founder of the Tibetan practice lineage. And so his words are not like just mere words. It's like he taught them in connection with his own experience of actual practice. And so they're very beneficial. And so he also summed up the characteristics of the guru. And so it's important for us to see how he summed up the characteristics of the guru. And there is a set of Dharma talks by Gampopa called The Excellent Deeds. And what it says in this one is, there are many characteristics of a guru taught in both the sutras and the tantras, but if we want to sum them all up, they can be summed up as three characteristics. And so what the three are is that the first is that they must have an unbroken lineage of the world. The second is that they have to have a good character and great compassion. And the third is they must have given up the lesser attitudes and be a basis for rousing devotion. In other case, if you like take the main points of all the characteristics taught from the sutras and tantras, the characteristics of a guru, there are these three. Now, Lord Dusan Khenpo also said this in a Dharma talk. He said there's not a single scripture in the secret mantra, the Prajnaparamita, that does not talk about the characteristics of a guru. Well, there's a lot taught about the characteristics of the guru. But if you want to say the main points, it's like as Gampopa said. So what Gampopa said is that so you need someone who's got the ties of dependence on this life, who can guide others on the path with a great prajna, and who, because of great compassion, does not forsake their students. And so if you want to wrap it up, it gets summed up in these three. So it's cutting the ties of this life, being able to guide others with great prajna, and having great compassion and not forsaking the students. And these words of Gampopa are really brief, and actually something for our ashla practice are really beneficial for us in our ashla practice. Also, the Lord and Guru Tsongkhapa was very learned in all of the texts on the sutras and tantras, and whenever he taught anything, he looked for the source in the sutras and the commentaries and other commentaries, and for a source, he'd look for a source when he taught. And so in his own commentary on the 58 verses, he says that if you're going to sum up the characteristics of a guru, they're summed up as this. And so what he says is, to summarize these points, that they have to have great compassion, they have to have stable, unshakable faith in the Mahayana, they have to know the treatises of the common and special vehicles well, they have to be thoroughly skilled in the steps of guiding disciples. They must have tamed their disciples by restraining them from negative actions of the three gates. So these are the 5 qualities or characteristics a guru must have. And so if you find someone who has that, then this is someone that the intelligent people that is worthy of being taken as a master. And I think there's a thing that's really important for us to understand there. Now, another one is Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Tai. The first Kongtrul Rinpoche, Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Tai. If we think about Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Tai, among all the, it's like there was no Dharma, the Sakya, Gelug, Nyingma, and Kagyu. So there's absolutely none that he hadn't listened, had studied, and he had the widest learning. And he wrote in his Treasury of Knowledge, he talked about the characteristics of the sutras. And what he said there is that primarily their lineage must be unbroken from Vajradhara to the present, and that must be unstained by faults and samsaya. The second is that they should remain within the discipline of their vows and samaya. And the third is that they must have the fifth instructions that have been passed down in the lineage. And the fourth is they must know the meaning of the words of the Buddha's words in the treatises and in particular tantras. And they must have a compassionate, altruistic lamed. And so these are the 5 characteristics, he says, that a guru of the secret mantra should have. Likewise, when you talk about a lama or a guru, then we'd probably, when you're thinking about the secret mantra Vajrayana, what we're meaning, as we generally say, is like we talk about there are 6 different types of gurus, but it's what's best known in our society. When we talk about a guru, we're talking about the guru from whom you receive an empowerment. That's what we primarily mean by a guru. And so what are the minimum characteristics that an empowerment who's going to give an empowerment should have? Well, what Tsongkhapa wrote in his great Stages of the Path of Mantra, so during his time, that is. So at the time, before Ajahn Sangha, there had been many great masters and siddhas. And so many of these great scholars and siddhas all said what they said about the gurus that need this, and what is basically generally agreed among them is that they must have really the empowerment in full, and they must dwell within the samaya and their vows. And that they need to have seen the practice of the lineage of the gurus, and through that know the 10 suchnesses and be knowledgeable about the rituals of giving and empowerment. And so they must have completed the approach and be allowed to or not prohibited by the deity. And so they must definitely have these 3 qualities. And so this is what most of the scholars and siddhas say. So this is what Tsongkhapa wrote in his great Stages of the Path of the Mantra. So this is the things about Gampopa school and Tsongkhapa's what Skantz wrote and what Jamgon Kongtrul Lodro Tai. And so these are really great summaries. And when you think about the characteristic of a guru that we need to, the characteristics a guru we take an empowerment from should have, then there's a good summary of this as well. In any case, there are so many characteristics of a guru that are taught, and so when we see them, I think there are 2 feelings that we might have. One of these is that that sort of an authentic guru with all the characteristics is really difficult to find. And if you do find one, it's like they're as rare as a Buddha. So there's basically no difference between them and a Buddha. And so if we meet such an authentic guru, we'd say, this is what a Buddha must be like. It's not like, so normally we think of a Buddha as being like so superior, and we'd have no idea whether we're ever going to be able to see one. And so when we meet that sort of an authentic guru, it's a wonder to think, well, what degree of, to what degree we'll think of them as an actual guru, as an actual Buddha. Another feeling that we might have is that we realize that a guru who actually fulfills these characteristics is actually very difficult to find. So that's another feeling that we might have. And so for this reason, so finding a guru who has all of the characteristics, 100% of them, as taught in the secret mantra Vajrayana, is like said, is like incredibly difficult. So it's like it said in the Udana Varga, people are ruined by following the lesser. Following one's equal one remains the same. Following the best one gains the highest. So therefore, we must follow those who are the best. So what this is basically saying is that the guru you're following should be someone who is superior to you in qualities. You shouldn't follow someone who has equal qualities or inferior qualities to you as a guru, because there's no benefit to doing so. So above we talked about all of this, the characteristics of the guru to avoid and the characteristics of a guru to follow. But if we find a guru who has no faults at all and who has all the qualities, who has all of the characteristics, and who has no faults at all, that's difficult to find someone like this. And so what we need to do is that we need someone who has both of the faults, and we need to measure the two of them. If we put them on a scale, see if they're equal. If they're equal, then that's not it. If the faults are even more than that, then they're predominantly the faults, then we should not follow them. We need someone who has more qualities than faults. If they have some faults, that's not a problem. But if they have more qualities than that, then it's okay to follow them as a guru. And so there's a text called The Ultimate Approach. And there's this quote that we often read. I said, "Due to the age of strife, gurus have qualities mixed with faults. They are not entirely free of misdeeds. Therefore, examine well whether they have more qualities, and then the children should follow them." So there's this quotation, right? So during this age of the 5 degenerations, the gurus all are mixtures of qualities and faults, and so there's none who's not entirely full of misdeeds, entirely full of faults. You won't find anyone like that. So you need to compare their qualities, and you need to see that someone who has more qualities is worthy of following. So the main point is that you can't just follow any old Lama at all. You can, everyone who's called by the name of Lama, who's able to hold a vase in their hand, it's not a sort of guru you should follow. Because the reason why is because we follow the guru is in order to fulfill our wishes for this and our future lives. Not just this lifetime, but also for the aims and wishes for our future lifetimes. And so that being so, we need to maintain an impartial or an objective attitude and examine whether the guru has the characteristics. We need to take a long-term view, and it's not like we just in the short term we have some sort of a feeling. It's like you feel good. Or someone says, "Oh, this is a good guru, this is a good lama," and you're just following them as a guru. Or it shouldn't be just, but your parents or older people tell you you need to follow them as a guru. And they shouldn't do it just because you're told to follow them as a guru. And some people just insist. And so you say, "Okay, you have to go along with me." They insist that you go along. You have to come take an empowerment with this guru, and they insist that you go along with that. And they pull you by your hands and your legs, and if they burn you, then you shouldn't go. You shouldn't do this with just anyone. Before you follow a guru, you must be incredibly careful. Once you have started following a guru, we need to be stable. No matter what circumstances occur, we should never not keep our faith in Samaya. We need to keep our faith in Samaya. Even if you have started following the guru, and you then decide for 100% certain that this guru does not have the characteristics and they have faults, you shouldn't do anything wrong. What you need to do is you should basically just distance yourself and remain a little bit. You shouldn't just criticize them or speak badly of them, because this will, ruin the circumstances that would allow you to meet a good Lama in the future. So in order to avoid this, we have to be really careful before we follow Guru. We should not just follow people say and then examine ourselves and then follow the Guru. Once we have followed a Guru, then we need to be stable and not just and say that's like, it's okay to follow, okay not to follow them. It shouldn't be like that. So if we find a guru who has these gurus, so what's the benefit to that? So what's the reason for looking at all these characters and seeing whether they have them? What's the benefit of doing it? And this is what Gampopa said in his String of Pearls, a collection of Dharma. So the main point is that, and so when a qualified guru and a receptive student come together, and in that very instant, then they can gain all the qualities. So that qualified guru and the receptive student, then as the moment they come together, they immediately, it's like all of the qualities spontaneously appear. This is what he says. No, so this is taking it as like a guru with all the characteristics and a receptive student, right? Likewise, there's also the questions and answers to Dusum Khenpa that was written by Gampopa. And what it says there is that just the nature of things, that when you have the guru with realization, and they give the genuine blessings to an authentic student, then at that point, all the qualities will rise. It's like they're all just being, it's like they're just piled on top of them all at a single time. This is just the nature of things. And that sort of a guru will receive the blessings of all the gurus of the 3 times. They'll receive the blessings of all the baskets of scripture. They'll receive the blessings of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And that'll include all of the Dakinis and Dharma protectors. Now, when we talk about blessings here, it's like it's being for someone who's like really receptive. It's like being able to receive. So basically, all Mahayana arises from blessings. Within that, the Dharma, the secret mantra, arises from blessings. In particular, Naropa's Dharma, the Kagyu lineage, arises from blessings. And so this lineage of mine, so this is Gampopa says, is a transition of the blessings of of an unbroken transition of the blessings of cities. The Kagyu, the previous Kagyu gurus ripened the later ones, and then liberated the later ones, and the later ones cherished the earlier ones like the crown jewels or like their own eyeballs. They really considered them incredibly important. It's like we have the words. It's like we have this word in the song. So the child are bad, but the guru is good. It's like you have no qualities, but because the guru has all the characters and because they have the qualities. And if you ever really, and if you really are convinced about this, then you can really accomplish the point. And so this is because it is the lineage of blessings, as I said. Also, the great protector of being Sampajaro said in a song, what he said is, if you never lack devotion for the guru, then if you do not know the Dharma, that's enough. Having the devotion for the guru, if you're just that vivid, if you never separate from that in your being, and even if you don't know the Dharma, it's okay. If you don't have the pith instruction, it's okay. If you can't meditate, that's fine. And this is like just doing that is the same for that. This is like the substitute for the Dakinis and protectors. That's enough. If you don't need to talk about pray to the yakshas for wealth, that's fine. For sponsors and places, enough as the sponsors and everything. That's all defined. And it's like if you need a wish fulfilling truth, that itself is that alone, that faith in the guru is enough. So as it says, this genuine devotion will give you everything. You'll have all the characters. So in general, the guru is important to the secret mantra, and in particular, in this Kagyu lineage in particular, the connection between guru and student is extremely important. The guru blesses the student, and the student arouses devotion for the guru, and this is like incredibly significant. And we can see this from the lives of the previous Kagyu masters and their writings. This is really, really clear. So if you find a guru has these characteristics, then when you're following them, what do you need to be careful about? So this is what is said here in these 50 verses. And I think that if we combine it with the outline given in Tsongkhapa's commentary, it's easier for us to understand. So in the if we talk about this in terms of the outline of the 50 verses in Tsongkhapa's commentary, we're talking about there's the discussion of the commentaries, when to follow that, and when we talk about following the guru, we're talking about there are 3 points, and so when we come to talking about the way to follow them in general, there are 2 points. And so within these, I'm talking about the actual way to follow. There's the brief, the overview and the explanation of how to follow the guru. So right now we're in the explanation of how to follow the guru. So the detailed explanation of following the guru has 2 parts: abandoning disrespect and how to be respectful. And so the first of these has 4 different points: abandoning criticism and denigration, abandoning upsetting the guru, explaining the unseen faults, and a summary of those. So these are 4 different points. But first of all, in terms of abandoning disrespect for the guru, and so in terms of disrespect, they're like denigrating the guru, like bringing them down, or criticizing the guru, or also upsetting the guru, making the guru angry. So these are these 3 different types. So like once you find a qualified guru with all the characteristics as we've spoken about before, you find the guru as the characteristics, and then you receive the empowerments, transmissions, and teachings from them. Then you have formed a connection of the guru and student. And so at that point, once you've done that, you have to keep this in mind. Like there's a story about this. And this is in the life story of Drupal Kunla. And what it says in the story is this. Some people so that there's this guru in this area who's giving a lot of empowerment. So are you going to go? We're going to go. So are you going to go? If you go, it's good. And so Drupal Kunla, what he said is this. If I can take the empowerment but don't have to keep the Samaya, but still reach enlightenment, then I'll go take the empowerment. But otherwise, if I take the empowerment, then have to keep the Samayas, they're explained in the Tantras. I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I can't keep the Samaya. And so he's saying, I can't go take the empowerments. Can't just go to. He says, I can't just go take empowerments from whatever the Lama comes by. So when people look at this on the outside, we're thinking about whether keeping or not keeping this. It's like people think about is whether you do what the guru says or whether you have wrong views about that. But this is something we also need to think about. Still, But whether you do as the guru says or not, it's not so easy to do that. Because if you have to do what an authentic guru says, then basically everything, doing anything that's not Dharma is basically breaking their words. If it's someone who isn't an authentic guru, then because you can do it because you can do Dharma things and whatever you do, because the guru doesn't have authenticity and does it. If you do things that aren't Dharma, then it's not so easy. But if it's an authentic guru, and you do some non-dharmic action, the guru with all the characteristics is going to be displeased and it's going to be unhappy. So it's not easy to follow, to do everything the guru says. So this is what Drupal Kunle said. In any case, when you're talking about this Samaya of the secret mantra, like there are a lot of them, like there are tens of millions of them. This is as well known. However, but the main thing that the Samaya comes down to the guru. And so what Gampopa says is that when you're following a quality of a guru, is the ultimate Samaya, the path of secret mantra. And so you need to keep the Samaya assiduously. So what the Samaya comes down to, the Samaya, the secret mantra comes down to the guru. So it's important to keep the Samaya of the guru's body, speech, and mind. This is incredibly important. It's not talking about keeping Samaya. It's not like you have the different laws in different countries. Every country has its own laws, and in particular, developed countries have more laws. Countries without so much, that aren't so developed, it's like you can do whatever you like. But in developed countries, it's like there are a lot of laws and rules, and if you don't keep them, then you would be committing offenses and misdemeanors. So similarly, when you have the Samaya, I think that there's so many things to keep in the Samaya. I think it's like really complicated, really difficult. Some people want to do the practice of secret mantra Vajrayana, I think, but I can't keep the Samaya, and they worry about this. And therefore don't do the secret mantra Vajrayana practice. It's possible there are people like that. However, when it talks about keeping the Samaya that's taught in the secret mantra, but it's not like the laws and rules are made up by people. These are made up by humans. It's not like when you don't follow a law or rule, you'll be punished. It's not like that. All the precepts of the secret mantra Samaya are connected to the student's own practice of the Dharma. It's like with the gurus of the past, the scholars and siddhas of India and Tibet have taught the Samaya according to their own experience, I think. I think that's basically what it is with it. It's in particular with the Indian Mahasiddhas, because they didn't keep the Samaya, then they had difficulties, and because of that, because they're actually linked to their own experience. It's not like it's like someone writing down what they thought and making up rules because of that. It's not like that. It's actually, if you don't keep it, and you see that I have a difficulty that arises, you have a problem that happens. But if you keep it, there's this great benefit. If you don't keep it, there's a real problem. And so it's that type of a path instruction. So for that reason, it says you have to keep the Samaya. You have to keep the Samaya, as they always say. And so that's why they say it so assiduously. Now, this is also something that the student needs to keep, but the guru does not. Actually, Samaya is something that both the student and the guru need to keep. Some people think the Samaya is mainly things that these Samayas do, and then it's okay for the guru to do whatever they want. So that's what it seems like to many people, but it's not like that at all. because the guru themselves is the student of another guru, right? And so, like, you can talk about there are different alternatives of being a guru and being a student. It's like there are many, three or four different. And basically saying that samaya is something that both the guru and the student need to keep. It's not something that only the student needs to keep. In any case, we talk about the samaya. In the secret mantra of Vyana, there are the 14 root downfalls. And the first of the 14 is because the Vajra holder said that accomplishment follows from the master, therefore to denigrate them is to be taught to be the first root downfall. So basically, the first root downfall is denigrating the master and criticizing the master. So that's the first root downfall. So basically, deriding the first guru and criticizing the first guru is the first root downfall of Samaya. So just as the first root downfall is denigrating and criticizing the guru, likewise in the 15 verses, the first thing is taught that you need to abandon is that you have to abandon denigrating and criticizing the guru. And then it teaches you how to follow the guru and provide them with service and respect and so forth, and go through the stages of serving the guru. So the first then is therefore abandoning and denigrating the guru. And the verse that teaches this reads, and so here it says, the general teaching is those who, having become their student, intentionally deride such lords, have denigrated all the Buddhas, they'll reap perpetual suffering. So the meaning of this is if I to explain this according to how it's taught in Tsongkhapa's commentary, I think this is the best way to explain it. Now, what it says there, if you have a guru who has all the characteristics, you're taking it as a basis that there's a guru, an authentic guru with all the characteristics. So this is after you have become a student. Because before you have a connection of guru and student, you can do what you want. But once you follow him as a guru, then at that point, if you deride that guru, if you criticize that guru, if you speak badly of them, then you will always reap perpetually experience sensations of suffering. So that's the main point there. And so the way that you would deride that guru is if you say to them, "Oh, that's immoral, not keeping their discipline, or they're lax in diligence." And if the guru is not intelligent, doesn't have a lot of qualities, if you think like they're a stupid person, and so if you criticize the guru in that way, that's the way that you would be deriding them or criticizing them. And so if you are criticizing that guru, as it says, if someone who intentionally derides such lords have denigrated all the Buddhas, it says, and the reason why this is because it's like they said, so that if you think in terms of the benefit, if you make an offering to the Vajra master, it has the same benefit as making offerings for the gurus. But in the opposite, in terms of accumulating wrongs and offenses, when you criticize the guru, you're criticizing all of the Buddhas. But when you criticize the guru, when you deride the guru, it's this incredibly big offense. This is an incredibly great offense. And when you are respectful of the guru, it brings so much benefit. So why is that? Now, there are many reasons for that, but one is like, I have to talk about the different reasons, but one reason, it's like when you have, I don't know whether you have the experience of it, but when we were little, when you wanted to light a fire, sometimes you want to light a fire, what you would do, there are a couple of ways you can light a fire. You can use a flint, the nomads would keep some flint, and you could rub that on rock, and they'd carry the flint, and you'd use that to make sparks and light fires. It's not like when I was little, it was like we have today. We didn't have any little gas lighters. There were no gas lighters that butane lighters we could carry. And so in our society, everyone, like the ancient people, brought flot, and so if they got to some unpopulated place and wanted to make a hearth and light a fire, then you would rub the flint on a rock and make a spark. And there are also some people, really skilled people, who had have a magnifying glass, and so you'd focus the rays of the sun through that, and you'd have some tinder. It's like some tinder, so like this substance that would light fire easily. So you focus the sun through the magnifying glass on the tinder, and when the two come together, then the tinder will catch fire. So if you don't have a magnifying glass, then you can't light tinder with just sunlight on its own. It's because of having a magnifying glass, then you're focusing the sunlight on the tinder that the tinder can catch fire. So it's similar. So the guru is like the same as the guru is like the magnifying. All the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas is like the sunlight. But it has to go through the magnifying glass that is the guru that is. And then it can light. Then the student's mind stream that's like tinder can catch fire. So for that reason, the guru is like the gateway for us to enter into the activity of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We aren't able to follow the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas ourselves. We haven't got to the level where we're able to do that yet. So the gurus, it's because of the guru, it's like they're the gateway for us to receive the blessings of all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. And so the gateway, or the way to do that, is the guru themselves. So that's one reason. And the second reason is the person who gives us the supreme and ordinary cities is the guru. And so because of this and other reasons, if you criticize the guru, there's a really grave fault or grave offense. And this isn't just in the secret mantra. This is also the same in the teachings of the foundation vehicle. It also talks about how important the guru is. For example, in the Treasure of Opportunity, it talks about, although there are not noble gifts to parents, the ill or dharma teachers, the bodhisattva's last rebirth brings yield surpassing any measure. So he talks about the four types of fields. So the field of wanderers, the field of suffering, the wheel of benefit, and the field of qualities. These are the four superior fields. And among these, the guru and spiritual friend are taught to be the field of benefit. And the way that they are that is, as Vasubandhu described in his auto-commentary on the Treasury, he says, which of the four superior fields do Dharma teachers belong in? He said they belong in the field of benefit. And the reason why they belong in the field of benefit is they give beings who are blinded by ignorance. They have no eye of prajna, they're blinded by ignorance. And the one who gives them the eye of prajna is the guru, the spiritual friend. They also teach that teach you how to practice virtue and give up non-virtue. And they also perform all the activity of the Buddha. And so for that reason, spiritual friend is like the field of benefit. This is really important. And so for that reason, it's not just in the secret mantra, but it's also the same in the scriptures of the foundation vehicle. Talks about how the gurus and spiritual friends are in the field of qualities. Likewise, if we look at Gampopa's life story, what it says is, Gampopa asked a question of many gurus, and the question that he asked is if it's said that you can achieve Buddhahood in a single lifetime and single body. So is this really true? So he asked many gurus this, many lamas this, and when he asked them, many lamas said that what they said is that it's just basically possible that you can do that, but it's really difficult to achieve Buddha in a single lifetime and single body. It's just possible, they said, really possible. But when Gampopa went to see Milarepa, and he asked him this very same question, is there achieving a Buddhahood in a single lifetime and single body? And then he asked, can you really achieve Buddhahood in a single lifetime and single body? What Lord Milarepa said was, when a guru with all the characteristics and a receptive student meet, when they come together, then the best will awaken in this lifetime. The middling will awaken the Pardo, and the least will awaken in the next lifetime, he said. Likewise, Gampopa also said in his talks, then he also spoke another question to many Kadampa gurus. What he said to them was, so he said, in order to achieve Buddhahood, we have to accumulate merit. So what is the most powerful thing? What is the most powerful way to accumulate merit, he asked. And then when he asked this, most of his gurus were Kadampa gurus, so he asked many Kadampa gurus this. But he also asked the same thing of his guru Milarepa. And when he asked Milarepa this question, what Milarepa said was, it means doing what the guru tells you to do, just as he says to do it. You supplicate the guru with devotion and practice in that properly, then that alone is the greatest of merit. There's no greater merit than this. And this is the answer that Milarepa gave. And so for that reason, the guru is like the great field of merit for us, is extremely important. So in brief, whatever extent you have devotion for the guru, that is the extent of blessings that you receive from the guru. As Gampopa said, the greatest blessings are for those with the greatest devotion, the middling blessings are for those with middling devotion, and the least blessing for those with the least devotion. So the degree of blessings depends primarily upon the degree of devotion that the student has. So you have a certain amount of devotion, that's the amount of blessing that you will receive. This is what Milarepa said to Gampopa in the future. When Gampopa went to see Milarepa, from that time onward, even before he saw Milarepa, he developed really strong devotion in Milarepa. Just merely hearing Milarepa's name, his eyes filled with tears, and he had goosebumps. He had like really genuine, uncontrived devotion for him. So when he met him, then he developed this really particular sort of devotion for him. But Milarepa said, in the future you will have faith that is even less contrived, even more uncontrived, even more genuine than that. And at the moment that you do that, then at that point, you will see the nature of the dharmata as through perception at that time. So if you have contrived devotion, then that's the only matter. That if you have uncontrived devotion, and it's really strong, then at that time you will be able to realize the nature of nature of the Dharmata. Now, as before, when Gampopa spoke about the three characteristics, as we mentioned before, one is having the unbroken lineage, having great competence in being, giving up the mind, giving up the lesser intentions, and being worthy of having devotion. So the third has different parts. Has two different parts, as being a good basis to develop devotion yourself and for others to develop devotion. What it means for yourself to develop good, what it means about developing devotion, when explaining this, what Gampopa himself said is that you have to have faith and devotion in the Guru. If you think that the Guru doesn't have a lot of pith and structures, he doesn't have, his realization is low, and I think it's probably. So I have more blessings and I have higher realization. And so if you're kind of like looking down on the Guru, if you're thinking, I'm better, then no matter how long you follow that Guru, then you'll never receive blessings or develop any realization in your mind stream. This is what it said. So it's incredibly important to have devotion for the Guru, and if you're in the opposite, you have disrespect for that, there'll be many faults that will arise. Now, one way that the faults will occur is that we ourselves, if we don't take a humble position, so we have a lot of pride. So this brings a lot of places when you have disrespect. For example, what it says in the Mahayana Sutras is that pride is like a great impediment to developing quality. He said this many times. For example, in this King of Samadhi Sutra, it says when our teacher, the Buddha, in the past was a universal emperor, he became a universal Chakravartin emperor, and he was able to gain. Not only could he gain power over the four continents, he also gained power over all the countries up to the realms of the gods. So he went up to he became the universal emperor. He went to the heaven of the 33, and the Lord of Gods Shakra came to welcome him. And at that point, this universal emperor began to feel a little bit of pride and complicity. He said, if you like, the Lord of Gods Shakra was coming to him, and he felt a lot of pride. And the moment that he lost that, his merit was exhausted, and he lost merit powers. He fell back to earth, and his life ended. And so this is one way in that pride is a great fault. Likewise, there's the Gandavyuha Sutra, which when it says on the passage on the following, when it talks about the 9 types of cognition, 9 different ways of thinking that it teaches. And one of them is you need a mind that is like a broom that abandons pride and great pride. A bride is something you should have a mind that considers pride, and great pride is. You have to think of yourself as being like you have to think about yourself as being inferior to the Guru, as being like garbage, actually, and to abide in pride and great pride. And so when you have to think about we should consider important, because it's like the Kadamba master of the Vast said, or what the Tsuprala said, there's a story that Karmapa used to say. Seeing me, the people who saw me, you can do not need to follow. But those who get to know me can't be limited. There's no way they can go up. They'll only fall in. It's said that the previous Karmapa said this. So as we get to know a Guru too well, it become the same as them. You think like we're the same as them. And so no, we eat the same food. We all have to wear clothes. We all have to go to the bathroom. We're all basically the same. There's not a whole lot of difference. It's just like the difference of whether they have a title or not, but otherwise there's no difference. So sometimes we have that thought, right? And it's not just with the Gurus. It's like what friends say at the beginning. They first have like a little bit of respect for each other, Then later, when you get to know each other, then you lose your respect, and then eventually it's like you're always just criticizing each other. You just start giving each other hard times. So you should never have the pride of thinking that you're better than the guru. You should always think of yourself as being lower than the guru. You should think about yourself as like it's being like a janitor, not as someone in a low position. It's actually best to think of yourself. So this is best to think of yourself as with the Kadampa masters, who's the passe. It's like the water of qualities can't get into the balloon of pride. If you have a balloon, you pour water in it, then the water can't go. The water spills everywhere. So the more greater your pride, then the less you can have inequalities. Because in order to develop qualities, in order to improve yourself or to develop qualities, you have to get rid of you. You need to see your own weaknesses and see what are your faults, what are your faults. And then when you see them, then you need to take a humble position and say, oh, I need to continue to study. There's still things I need to study. My previous education hasn't helped. And so you then take a humble position. When you think that way, if you instead of that, you think to yourself, no one else knows it but I do, then you're not taking a humble place. Another thing that you need is that when you see the others' qualities, and they need to study. So he has qualities that I don't. So I need to see if I can learn something from him and gain some qualities from him. And so when you see others' qualities, then that naturally happens, right? So if you have a lot of pride, you don't see mere weaknesses, you don't see other people's qualities. And if that happens, there's no way that you can improve yourself. In addition to not improving yourself, you start denigrating other people. So for that reason, in the secret mantra of Vajrayana, if you think that you are superior to the guru, then there's not, in addition to not being able to develop any of the enlightened qualities, you will lose all the ones that you already had. For once there was a great Mahasiddha of Chakravarti named Krishnapada. He was very well named Krishnapada. What his name was called was Jalandhara. So this Guru Jalandhara, he didn't do what the Guru said. The Guru said, you're not ready to go into yoga conduct. Even so, he didn't listen. And when he went off into do the yogic conduct. So in the old days, this is when you go into the forest with a consort. So that's what they're talking about. So he went off to engage in the conduct before getting the Guru's permission. But when he did this, then his activity flourished. And he had several thousand students. So one day he got in a ship and he got in the drain and went off to Sri Lanka. And on the way, then all of a sudden, the ship capsized and sank in the ocean. And at that time, all of his other students, drowned in the water. Now, only Krishnapada did not sink in the water and drown, because he had miraculous powers. The power of it was because he was able to walk on the water. So you can walk on the water without sinking. So because he had that power, at that point, Krishnapada, what he thought himself was, I have this miraculous power that I can walk on water without sinking. Even my guru can't have qualities like this. He got a little proud, right? And the moment that he got proud, at that very moment, he lost his miraculous powers and sank into the water. And when he sank into the water, then, and he just fell into the water, and he was difficulties, like he was about to, drown. And then at that point, the Guru Jalandhara came in the sky and scolded him terribly. And because then And so then at that point, then Krishnapada then confessed to the Guru. And then what Jalandhara said is, so you're not going to achieve supreme siddhi in this life, he said. But you should write some treatises, and if you do that, then in your next lifetime you will achieve siddha, the siddhis, the supreme siddhis. So this is a story of an Indian master. Now we have a great Tibetan Mahasiddha. Milarepa had two great disciples, the one, the moon-like and the sun-like. So the sun-like was Gampopa, and the moon-like one was Rechungpa. So these were the two main disciples of Milarepa. Now Rechungpa was like the moon-like disciple, but sometimes he didn't listen to what the Guru said. He did strange things. And so not just one or two times, but actually quite a few times. And so there's one story to tell about this. So one time, Rinpoche went to India a few times, right? So one time he went to India and he met Tipupa, the tree of secret mantra. And he also met Machi Tupi Gyalmo. And he received all the cycles of teachings of the formless Dakinis. These are incredible teachings. And so then when he was on his way back, he met this non-Buddhist. When he met this non-Buddhist, what the extremist non-Buddhist said to him was, you're on the way to going to Tibet, right? And so when you get to Tibet, you need to be able to uphold, spread, and uphold, maintain, and preserve and spread the teachings. And in order to do this, you also need to protect the teachings. So I have these instructions for protecting the Gurus, and you really need them. So if you have any gold, give it to me, and I'll give you these instructions. It's like and so the Indians really wanted gold, so Rinpoche had a bit of gold, and he gave him. And he spent 7 days studying this. And so I think this is a Guru. There's a 7-day sorcery that you... And so he studied this for 7 days. And then Rinpoche gets, if you study it for 7 days, so you can show the signs of success. In any case, then, Milarepa was in retreat at Dhammaras Chongling. And at that point, Milarepa had a vision. And so first, it's like that Rinpoche initially was a stupa with a really brilliant light. He had it all received the teachings on the Dharma cycles of the formless Dakinis. It was like this crystal stupa that shed brilliant light. And then he met this, on the way back, he met this new Buddhist, and he received these black mantras. And it's like that sutra, that crystal stupa disappeared and became like a tornado. And so when he became like a tornado, then Milarepa began to feel a little bit uneasy. It's like, what's happening to my retreat? He's having a problem. And so he immediately left his retreat. He went into Palma Plain, just as on the way to India. There is this Palma Plain. You have to go, and the road goes through. It's this huge plain that you have to go through. And basically, if you start going across it at 5 in the morning, it's like even at 5 or 6 in the afternoon, you won't get to the end of it. It's this huge plain. And he went down to meet Rinpoche. And when he came down to, it's a really big plain. So Rinpoche was coming this way, and the Gurus, when they came from each other, it's like they'd see each other from far away. At that point, Rinpoche thought to himself, now I went to India and I got all these Dharma teachings. I got all these pith instructions, and now the Guru, he's probably coming to welcome me, right? And so he's kind of happy about this. Like, so I've got bringing all these important Dharma teachings. So if I prostrate him, was he going to prostrate to me? And there's this, there was like a tradition before. They can make a prostration, someone to prostrate in return. So they met each other at like the upper part of the plain. The master and disciple met there, and so Rinpoche prostrated to Milarepa. And when he did that, then Milarepa didn't return the favor. He didn't say anything. He's just kind of sitting there saying. And Rinpoche then Rinpoche didn't know what to do. And so he said, Guru, how are you? Are you well? And Milarepa said to Rinpoche and said that he was nothing wrong with me. He sang the song called the Song of I'm nothing. I'm a yogi who has there's never anything, never having nothing's ever wrong with me. And Rinpoche then said, okay, Guru, I worked hard. I went to India and I'm bringing back the Dharma cycles, the farmless vehicles. These are incredible empowerments and things. I've come doing that. So in order for these dharmas to be able to flourish in Tibet, so to look at them and see, are you happy or not? See if it's a suitable dharma for you, so please look. And if you think it's good, then so then you should praise it and celebrate and think, I brought this dharma, you should think that it's, so you should actually, if you think there's any, so you should please praise this dharma that I brought back. And so at that point, then the Guru, the Milarepa, he thought to himself, Rinpoche went to India and he got some dharma, so now he's got really proud. And he said to Rinpoche, he said, Rinpoche, you shouldn't be so proud. And he sang a song to reduce his pride. So there was like this packet that had all of Rinpoche's books and stuff that Rinpoche had carried in his back. The Guru himself picked it up himself and he left really quickly. Rinpoche had come from a long way. He'd come from India. He was really tired. He was like exhausted. He was incredibly exhausted. And then in addition to that, Milarepa is always very healthy. So he's like able to go really fast. Rinpoche couldn't keep up with him. He was unable to keep up with him. So Rinpoche thought to himself, I brought all these incredible instructions from India. And I think that it's not that he doesn't want them, I think. He should probably, it's like he's just pretending that he doesn't want them. It's like he's not keeping of them. But maybe, but he's taken all my books. So I'm wondering why he's taken all my books. If I can't keep up with him, if I don't follow him quickly, it's probably if he gives all these sticks to someone else, some pointless person. And so then he thought that was really a problem. So he immediately ran up after him. So please wait a minute. And he's saying this and told the story about how he went so much difficulty to get all these instructions and Dharma teachings. And the Milarepa waited for Rinpoche and then he again listened. He sang to a song Rinpoche sang. He used to talk about saying so much about how you met Chipupa, but I said, I actually have a better connection, deeper connection to Chipupa than you do. You're talking all this about Vajravati, but compared to you, I've been with Vajravati no longer. It's like I've longer. She's an older acquaintance of mine than of yours. So then the master disciple who were going up the Palmapatang plain, and Rinpoche then at that point had like a kind of a bad thought, and the bad thought he had is that like if with other Dharma practitioners, they always have Dharma provisions. While they're doing retreat, they have a little bit of food to eat. There are none who have nothing to eat. But my Guru, forget about having food to eat. In the evening, he doesn't even have a good place to, a good house, a good place to sit, or a good bed for the night. Look at his body. It's like it's turning to go blue and decaying, and his hair is just like this big, it's turned into like felt because he hasn't washed his hair for so long, as everything is like, been matted into locks like felt. And he's like spent his entire life wearing a single cotton robe. Up to this point, maybe he says that he's achieved says he has reached accomplishment, but I've never seen any signs of that. It probably isn't someone who has bad karma could be called a siddhi. Some beggar with bad karma. It's probably not someone like that. So this really bad thought. It's because he's kind of unhappy, right? The reason is because he'd, gone to a lot of hardship to go to India and bringing back all these texts and all these. And Milarepa acted as if he didn't care, and he said, didn't say what you did is good. But he kind of acted as if he didn't really want them. And so he was kind of disappointed and unhappy about that. And when this happens, then as he started thinking all sorts of things, my guru, I don't know, what is this guru of mine like? So I guess he's probably not some sort of beggar with bad karma who's just called by a siddhi, is he? And all of a sudden at that point, Milarepa saw on the way, he found a yak horn. When they found a yak horn, then Milarepa, it's usually as it said, and Guru said to him, son, it said there's a stain that says if you find unnecessary jewels, sometimes they'll take necessary. So carry that yak horn, he said. Now, Rinpoche, what he thought was, sometimes my Guru, my Guru says that everything is food, need nothing at all. And sometimes we have a saying, right? And when you get old, you get older, you get angry, you get more lustful, right? And similarly, or get greedier as you get older. So what are we going to do with this yak horn? And so Rinpoche said, so what are we going to do? You can't eat it, you can't wear it, so just leave it. Milarepa said is that you aren't going to be, your mind isn't going to get fixated on just this amount of stuff. There will be a time when you need it, so carry it. And so as he carried it, then Rinpoche, what he thought? He didn't really want to carry that yak horn. So after a little while, I said, I can't carry this. I can't carry this. But the Milarepa said, don't forget, keep carrying it. We're going to keep it a little bit longer. At this point, the sky was really clear. It was a really beautiful, clear day. Then all of a sudden, all the clouds suddenly gathered all at once. They all gathered suddenly. And there's a huge hailstorm. There's these huge hailstorms like the size of the hand, like huge, like size of a fist. Suddenly. Oh, there's such huge. Rinpoche threw down the yak horn, and he thought he had to run away. And it was hailing so hard that he couldn't find any place to house it. So he just sat down and covered his head. He sat down and he had no idea where the Guru went. He didn't even think about where the Guru went. Immediately he sat down and covered his head. Now, for a little while, the hailstorms decreased, and the hailstorm decreased or let up a little bit. And he's sort of looking around and saying, well, where's the Guru? And only then did he remember, where's the Guru? He looked everywhere and they couldn't find the Guru at all. But then it's like there's a clear sound of a song. Where is this sound of the song coming from? It sort of coming, he saw it was coming from the yak horn. So when he got to the yak horn, he went up to the yak horn. It's like the sound was coming from inside the yak horn. It's like, how is this possible? So and immediately Rinpoche tried to pick up the yak horn. He tried to pick it up. It's like so like it's heavy as a rock, and he was unable to lift it. He's like, what's going on? So he can put his cheek down to the ground and looked inside the Yakorn and looked and said, and without the Yakorn getting any bigger or without Milarepa getting any smaller, it's like the end of this, like the front is very wide. So at the very thinnest part of the rectum there, he saw Milarepa was way down inside of the thinnest part. Not only that, he was doing the yoga moves, all the exercises. It's like he was playing the yoga there. And Rijumpa and playing and singing the song to Rijumpa. The main point of this song was, I said, Rijumpa, sometimes your view is really high and sometimes it's really low. Your meditation is sometimes clear and sometimes it's really unclear. Your behavior is sometimes kind of very relaxed, and sometimes it's like you're really rushed. And so all these various things. It's not, you aren't stable. So now I'm in the thinnest part of the Yakorn. And there's more room in the front, in the wide part there. So come there and stay with me. Rijumpa at this point wanted to see first, could he get his hand in? And when he put his hand in, he couldn't even get his knuckles past him. So it's like, how can I get in? It was really weird. And so he immediately supplicated the Guru. He gave a confession, and only then Milarepa came out of the Yakorn. And he looked at the sky, gazed up at the sky, and immediately all the clouds, they all just disappeared, and the sun shined really warm. And when the warm sun came out, then all the clothes were like, but it was had been all hit by the hail. They were all, it was like completely wet, so they all dried. They had to stay there while the clothes dried. So this is the story. Rijumpa, he has like these bad thoughts about the Guru and had some pride in himself. It's a little bit better situation. The thing, the reason is because Milarepa had created the hailstorm, right? It was actually very fortunate for him because Milarepa helped him. And he was able to break his pride. So many other things. That's not the only one. There are a lot of times that he didn't do what Milarepa said, and he did the things that Milarepa said not to do. There are many stories about this. In any case, because he didn't. And because he didn't do everything the Guru said, there are many stories about how he had many difficulties in this life, many visible experiences that he had in this life. So I think that this is probably a good place to leave it off for here today. There's a lot more to say, but I think this is a good place to leave it here tonight. It's been quite a bit, so thank you.